If Jetman was the second wind carrying Sentai into the new generation, and Dairanger was the proving ground for the future of the show, then Dairanger was the affirmation that this new format can work, and it can feel fresh time and time again, at least for a little while. After Jetman's revival of the show, Dairanger kicked off a few meaningful changes to the formula that would then create the new Sentai formula. 6 heroes, 7-piece mecha combinations, stronger toy theming, robots that look less retro. The biggest thing that Dairanger carried over from Jetman was the emphasis on character. Dairanger took a bit of a weird stance on this and gave its major character work to the 6th hero and the villains, with a bunch of the kids of the week as well. Dairanger was pretty generous in that way. The team was the aspirational kind. You work to try to be as good as them. They didn't necessarily have to be deep in the way that Jetman was. So while Dairanger carries a lot from Dairanger in its push toward the future, it did kind of cut out that aspirational team dynamic. In this way, Dairanger kind of feels like a mashup of Jetman and Dairanger. Dairanger is even scrappier and youthful than Jetman, and it's fantastical much in the same way that Dairanger was. The weapons and upgrade path of Dairanger feels very in line with Dairanger, but they feel invented and tangible in the way that Jetman was. Dairanger, while being a fusion of these two legendary shows, also proves to be one of the most standalone and versatile shows in the Super Sentai catalog. It's the all-rounder, the underdog that grows into a force of nature, unassuming but powerful, something that truly transforms before your eyes. Before we get too far into my reading of the show, let's fall in line with my other Sentai episodes and talk about design first. These suits are so great. They use a lot of white, but not in the way that Jetman or other older Sentai do. I said in my Jetman video that an abundance of white on a Sentai suit can make the suit feel retro. And while I still stand by that, Dairanger feels distinctly modern. I can't exactly pinpoint why. It could be in the gloves and how they, with the boots, balance out the suit, but I'm not a costume designer. I really don't know. Dairanger is themed after Chinese mythology. The Red Ranger's mecha is a Chinese dragon, Pink's a Phoenix Ranger, there's a white tiger, their mech's a giant Chinese knight, their superpowers are literally called Chi power. It's really in your face, but really what I'm trying to say here is that the theming is incredibly strong. Everything about the weapons that the Dairangers use are so in line with this as well. Guns and swords themed after Chinese dragons, ring blades, bow staffs, and so on. This, combined with the way that the fight scenes were filmed in this show, give a distinctly martial arts movie feel to the whole thing. The entire toy line feels so kinetic and inspired, and that's before we even get into the mecha. The mecha in Dairanger are just gorgeous. Ryuseo is a piece of art, and Daireno is such an unbelievably good advancement of Daijujin. Ugh, it's so good. Here we have Red Dragon's mecha turning into Ryuseo, a solo mecha, and then putting on the other pieces of the combination like a suit of armor. A few shows have done something like this, and it's always been one of my favorite ways to handle a 5-piece mecha combo. It's just so collaborative, while also recognizing the Red Hero as the main character. which is, largely a mandate from toy companies because red is just more popular with kids. So doing mecha in this way really feels like the companies at play here are having their cake and they're eating it too. Kiba Ranger and Wan Tiger, design-wise, are just incredibly great follow-ups to Dragon Ranger and Dragon Caesar as well. Kiba Ranger really feels like a step to the side next to the Dairangers. He doesn't feel exactly like a stronger version outright, but a separate and similarly themed hero. Wan Tiger complements him really well too, with an incredible animal form, just outstanding, and turning into a robot that really serves the spunky active nature of the character, even if the robot form isn't as drop-dead gorgeous as Wan Tiger's animal form. The 7-piece combo for Dairanger is a definite step down from Zyuranger though, feeling less like a chariot of a righteous god and more like a stack of animals slamming down on enemies. I really do love Daimugen though, even if he's just another situation where the animal form is so awesome and the robot form is just serviceable. Okay, yeah, I think I got that all out of my system. Let's get down to business. Dairanger is about a secret war between two tribes that spans over 6,000 years. Our heroes are part of the Dai tribe, who use Chi power, and the villains are part of the Gorma tribe, and they use Yo power. Not your power, Yo power. That's a dumb joke. I'm sorry. This is a war that has been bubbling under the surface of our modern world, and we pick up at the point where things start to really boil over. Master Kaku recruits 5 young adults to help him as soldiers. The first episode feels unique in that it mostly just follows Ryo, our would-be red hero, being chased by Gorma and being recruited into the Dairangers in a very rushed, spur-of-the-moment way. It's a very kinetic and exciting opening to the show. And while we're on that, let's talk about the cast. Ryo is Ryo Ranger, a restaurant cook that gets pulled into this whole thing over the course of an afternoon, that eventually grows into a strong leader for the team. Daigo is Shishi Ranger, a guy that seems standoffish at first that really actually has a heart of gold and runs a really sweet pep shop. Shoji is Tenma Ranger, a hot-blooded, goofy boxer that's definitely one of the most immediately endearing characters in the show. Kazu is Kirin Ranger, a hairdresser that, unfortunately gets kinda done dirty by the show by just not having a ton of focus for his character. He gets, 2 episodes. He uses Drunken Fist style, though, and that rules. And finally, Rin is Ho-Oh Ranger. Rin actually sort of narrowly escapes the distinction of just being the girl on the team, and actually is shown to be the most adept at channeling chi power at the start of the series. And over the course of the series, she's given a fair bit to do, being fairly instrumental in one of the main arcs of the series. The Dairangers are led by Master Kaku, and he's easily the most proactive team mentor figure in a Sentai we've covered so far. Kaku has a lot of mystery about him, and it's really satisfying when the curtain is pulled back eventually throughout the show's run. The main cast of Dairanger is fairly solid overall, but they take a lot of time to really click. There's not that desperate, instantly satisfying character dynamic from Jetman, and there's not as many of the focus episodes as you'd get in Zyuranger, so for a while the Dairangers kind of seem weak as characters. Slowly they are built up though, and by the end of the show you are sad that you have to say goodbye. An actual weak aspect of the show are the villains. The Gorma Triumvirate, Shadam, Gara, and Zydos are all intimidating characters with some great suit design behind them, but they are just so shallow. Shadam and Gara get a little bit throughout the show, but only Gara really feels fleshed out because of it. Three-dimensional character writing almost bounces right off of Shadam. It's really weird. He's just so committed to being a flat villain. And Zydos gets nothing. He just kinda is a weird, goofy dumbass, and while I kinda love it, he ain't no top hat and he ain't no book back either. The monsters in Dairanger really do it for me, though. I love some of these guys a lot. I mean, look at this fucking Kabuki guy. How good is this guy? God. The first leg of the show was honestly kind of rocky. As I said earlier, the Dairangers as characters take a little bit of getting used to, as they don't really quite show their true colors until later on. Since Sentai is all about this team dynamic, that means the show in turn has a bit of a growing pain to go through as well. There are 2 definite highlights though. One is an arc where Ryo's father is actually revealed to be a Gorma general, and the other is the start of the Kujaku arc with Daigo. Both of these segments of the first leg of the show do a really great job of fleshing out the characters just a bit, while also leaving room for future work to be done. The Rio stuff is kinda standard. His dad was a Gormal general, and that obviously makes him conflicted as a Dai warrior, and while the show feels content to just kind of leave it at that for a while, it is actually something that the show comes back to on a larger scale later on. The beginning of the Kujaku arc with Daigo just really fleshes out Daigo as a genuine, kind-hearted person rather than just a weird guy. His characterization is really bizarre at the beginning. It's kinda hilarious. The show very clearly leaves this arc open for the future, though, and while you would be led to assume that this is a love interest thing, it actually does get a bit more interesting than that. Just like Zyuranger before, at episode 17, the sixth hero appears in the form of Ko, a child who just assumes the role of Kiba Ranger, a warrior based on the White Tiger. And Ko adds a little dimension to the show, acting as a kind of reverse of Burai's older brother dynamic to the other Zyurangers. Ko is instead the younger brother to the already very young Dairangers, and they have to look after him from time to time. For quite some time, the Dairangers actually have no idea that Kiba Ranger is actually Ko, and the way that this is hidden from our heroes is honestly pretty hilarious. Ko has this talking sword, Byakuyo Shiken, and while he transformed as Kiba Ranger, he just lets Byakuyo do all the talking. Look, it might not be all that funny whenever I explain it, but in the context of the show, it killed me, alright? It's really funny, okay? Please agree. To come back to some of the subplot stuff, I just want to add that one of Dairanger's most interesting qualities is just the fact that it has a bunch of characters who have powers or just general story relevance that aren't also members of the main team. The Dairangers and Kiba Ranger aside, we have Kaku, the proactive combative mentor, Kujaku, a follower of the Peacock Buddha and Dai warrior extraordinaire, Ko's mother. She literally doesn't have a name, sheesh, who seems to have connections to Shaddam himself, Cameo, a turtle enthusiast that literally turns into Daimugen, the Turtle Mecha, and Jin Matoba, a fucking assassin that just squares up every time he sees Rio and incidentally gets turned into a Gorma badass by Zydos. But he's too badass for the Gorma, so he literally never listens to them, and he just tries to fight with Rio because Rio is very strong and the only badass in town badass enough to fight him.
Now his lights, he talking all that shit. I know that he a bitch. Pulling up to his house and busting in his crib. I'ma hit him in the throat, break his fucking jaw. God damn, I love to break the law. We just fight, no more shootout. Hell no, knocking you out.
Dairanger has a really fun cast. This cast of revolving in and out of the plot every arc really just serves to make the show's pacing actually flow really well. Arcs blend pretty nicely into one another, and episodic filler episodes are actually kept to a minimum. But even then, one filler episode about 3 dipshit Gorma monsters becomes a 3-part arc in and of itself over the course of the whole series, so even the one-off stuff feels pretty important at times. It's honestly really impressive for its time, and it honestly really impresses when compared to some of the current day Sentai too. Some of these characters, the Dairangers or otherwise, can feel kind of one-note at times, particularly Ko and his mom. But in this show, it's more about how the show uses these characters. The show is effectively a war story, and all these characters end up being pieces in a greater war game that Shaddam and company are waging against the Dairangers. And yeah, let's finally crack into that war game. Over the course of its run, Dairanger ends up feeling fairly massive, with one of the bigger and more fantastical worlds I've personally seen in a Super Sentai series. The fascinating thing about this is also the fact that the show is also one of the most toned-down shows in the Super Sentai catalog when it comes to larger set design and stuff. Like, obviously, some of the Gorma stuff is pretty grandiose, but I think a lot of other pieces of the world displayed in the show end up feeling like imitations. A show very much gesturing at a larger world outside of the confines of your TV. This is kinda something every Toku does because of budgetary concerns, and I might just look weird right now just saying this about this show in particular, but I think Dairanger gave off that feeling more than most shows, and I feel like that's kind of the point. Dairanger is a show that, as a kind of follow-up to Zyuranger, has the Dairangers inherit things from their ancestors. Where in Zyuranger, that show ended with the Zyurangers passing something important on to the children of the world. In the Dairangers' case, what they inherited was war. Conflict unending. These are kids thrust into a life or death situation, basically unwilling, having to piece things together along the way and also try to end the war that they've inherited. The really interesting thing about this is how it factors into the supporting cast and their relationship to our heroes. Ryo has to deal with the fact that his dad was a Gorma general. Kojaku was best friends with Gaara in the past. Ryo ends up caring deeply for Jin, who has basically had his life ripped away by the Gorma, turning him into a warrior. Ko, being a Dairanger at all, raises some questions about how far the Dai clan is willing to go for this thing. And the Gorma Three Stooges being well-meaning morons gives a peek into the humanity of some of the monsters that the Dairangers have been battling this whole time. Throughout the show's run, Dairanger makes you question the cost of this war and what the worth of it all really is. In fact, not much reason is given at all as to what actually started the war. All that's really told is that it's been going on for thousands of years. In this way, the whole Gorma-Dai conflict looks more like the Sneetches by Dr. Seuss than an actual complicated war. The show, unfortunately, doesn't really dive deeply at all into any of the thoughts that could fall at the feet of the Dai clan, but I think the show does encourage examination into the Gorma in a way that I genuinely didn't expect. This back and forth culminates in two of the biggest twists in Dairanger. The first is that Master Kaku is actually the Gorma Chief of Staff. He broke off from the Gorma to join the Dai because of a difference in beliefs, but returns to the Gorma a couple of times because the bossest hog of all entering the scene. Daijinryu is a giant space dragon that touches down on Earth a couple of times throughout the second half of the show to bring about endless death and destruction. Why is Daijinryu doing this? To punish the world for an endless war. This results in Kaku approaching the Gorma to call a truce, so Daijinryu just can kind of fuck off. Both parties agree, but something always happens to bring the war back on. Daijinryu is a pretty obvious symbol for the inevitable death that war conjures up every time it's waged. Kaku doesn't reveal himself as a Gorma to the Dairangers and the viewers right until the end, but this twist does a really great job of throwing that question into the face of viewers once again. What is truly different about the people on the other side of your wars? The longer the show goes on for, the more apparent it becomes that there's no meaningful difference between the Gorma and Dai. It's that Starbellies and non-Starbellies thing again. Kaku ends up battling one-on-one with Shadam to see who will be the next Gorma Emperor. If Kaku wins, the Gorma change their ways and the war ends. If the Shadam wins, the Gorma get even more ruthless and the war continues. After a long, tense battle, Kaku loses, and he dies. The second big twist happens at around the same time. Extending closer to the end of the show, Zydos ends up crumbling into dirt after a battle, which scares the hell out of Gaara. Over the last couple episodes, this moment kinda hangs over the final battles as you wonder if the same thing will happen to everyone else. Shadam lets the big secret slip while taking control from Gorma 15. Quick aside about Gorma 15, I love this guy. He's so goofy and weird and doesn't seem to take this whole war thing seriously. I mean, just listen to his fucking voice. I love that. This guy kills me. Anyways, Gorma 15 dies horribly, turning into dirt and then being reduced down to his head so he can make some final lines right before he bites it for good. This is horrifying. Shadam reveals that all of the Gorma that have been up to this point just been mere puppets for Shadam, revived from dirt and mud so that he can take control as Emperor. This admittedly doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you actually think about it, but I think it makes emotional sense, which I kind of value more. See, this twist just pushes that whole examination of war to the forefront. War, if you boil it down really far, reduce it down to its barest elements and ignore very important context, is just powerful men posturing to feel powerful. This is stuff that I think would come through pretty clear for even kids. The imagery is all there and I think it's pretty powerful. This all culminates in the Dairangers' final battle with Shadam. Because war is still going on and stinking up the earth, Daijinryu comes back to fuck up the world until they cut it out. This results in Gorma Palace being destroyed and Kaku telling the Dairangers to hightail it out of there, that they can't ever truly do away with the Gorma. That war will be waged over and over again as long as there are people on Earth. Ryo disagrees and runs after Shadam while the rest of the team gets the hell out. After Ryo kills Shadam in a small struggle, Shadam finds out that he is also made of dirt, showing that for all his grandstanding, he was no more special than the people he thought he ruled over. After reuniting and then in turn finally disbanding the Dairangers, the story skips forward 50 years for the epilogue. We pick back up on a Dairanger reunion, where all the members get together to reminisce on old times. This is a really great, funny moment because, I mean, look, they just put old people makeup on the members, even Ko. Suddenly, there's a Gorma attack, and the old team steps outside to see if it's true, that the Gorma never truly died. It is true. And not only that, the Dairangers' grandchildren are now the new Dairangers, poised to take on new threats and do away with them. This gives Ryo pause, and he thinks about what Kaku said in the Gorma Palace right before Shadam died. The kids, who hilariously don't match up with their grandparents' personalities at all, transform and then form Daireno, and then destroy the monster, saving the day. There's a sigh of relief that fills the air. The kids will be alright. This ending really struck me, though, as something way more interesting than I would have expected out of this show. There's a lot of ambivalence in this ending. The kids will always be there to fend off evil. There will always be good to stop evil. But the show making a point to express how depressing the endlessness of this whole thing is just really different and striking to me as a Sentai. I actually think I would have liked to see more of this ambivalence throughout the show. I think not examining the Dai Clan's actions throughout is a missed opportunity, as Gormicide ended up being treated so well and thoughtfully throughout the show's ending moments. The mecha fights are also mostly nothing, which is disappointing when you put them up against how great the mecha designs are across the board. I also wish the first leg of the show was stronger, but again, that doesn't really matter all that much to me at the end of the day, especially when presented with a Sentai ending like this. Down the line, when we talk more and more about Sentai, we'll be encountering shows every now and again that follow this more serialized format, with an emphasis on long-running arcs. And while I'm sure Dairanger isn't the first Sentai to do things this way, the show definitely does it well. Like its heroes, Dairanger inherited something pretty huge from Zyuranger and Jetman before it, and ran with it, making something really striking and interesting while also narrowly avoiding falling too hard into any strict format. For Sentai, that's pretty commendable. Alright, and that was my Dairanger episode. I actually feel like I've been working on this one for a long time. Agito and Dairanger were things I was watching over the past, few months, while I was kind of getting things done with the Ultraman stuff. So we're kind of ending, some backlog stuff that I was covering. Unfortunately, I've had a pretty eventful past couple months, so, I'm having to, get really back on track with watching stuff to get done here. So, but I think the next episode might be a toss-up between either Kaku Ranger or Kamen Rider Ryuki. We'll have to see where it goes. And I have something really, really cool planned for Halloween, I think. And yeah, so I think I've got everything planned out for basically through the rest of the year, which is really exciting. I'm so excited to dive into more shows and stuff. 01 comes out next week, which is awesome. I cannot wait. I'm so over the moon excited about that show. And yeah, if you want more up-to-date current hot takes about the current Tokusatsu stuff, I won't be covering that stuff on this channel for quite some time, just because I've got a whole plan going here, which isn't really conducive to views, but it's a passion project. And so if you want that stuff, follow my Twitter at @anti_laser, and hey, check out my Patreon if you want some written content every now and again, or if you want to see my videos one day early, or whenever it drops, you want to listen to the podcast 1 week early, the podcast being Discuss All Monsters, a podcast about the Toho monster films. It's Godzilla, and then everything kind of related to Godzilla, so we're covering Rodan, Mothra, everything. And it is me with my friend Wyatt, who runs the cartoons related video essay series It's Only Magic, which I will link in the description. He's a wonderful friend of mine and makes videos pretty similar to this style of thing, and he makes really, really great, insightful stuff on cartoons. He has a really awesome episode on OKKO that kind of relates to some stuff on this channel as well, so please give that a look. And yeah, I think that's about everything. Discuss All Monsters should be coming quite soon. maybe in September, most likely in October. We'll see where that leads, but we've got a few episodes in the can, so we're definitely getting rolling on that and everything. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Love you, love you, love you. Bye.